In a world devastated by a chromal shift of their parent star, the last great power must be on constant lookout to reclaim the knowledge of the past and add people with the skills in the present to rebuild and make a glorious future. Tales told that this land used to harbor many plants and animals, some big, some small, some in between. But after Lucille, the Lightbringer, changed her color, nearly everything died. Now, the land was a desert for as far as the eye could see, and many within this tribe had never witnessed an area that was not arid and dry. Most of these people had never seen a flying craft in their lives. There really was only one nation that could still afford to use them, and the state rarely ventured this far from their own borders. Nevertheless, a crowd had formed outside the camp to watch as a helicopter approached from the west to settle down in the sands beyond the camp. The masses wore loose coverings of many light materials, from the increasingly scarce modern textiles to fabrics of a more rustic nature. All had as much of their skin covered as possible to protect from the harmful radiation of Lucille, now more dangerous than it had ever been before the shift. As the hurricane of dust kicked up by the rotating wings erupted, the masses waited. Soon the craft settled down, and a lone man exited, grabbed a large backpack, and shut the sliding door. The man wore loose desert-colored military-grade BDUs with multiple pieces of technology and munitions attached all over him and his large backpack. With his oversized hat and paint covering his face instead of the local custom of a cloth, there was no way he would ever blend into this crowd. After he hit the side of the craft, the metal bird leapt back into the air, and the sands calmed once more. He approached the masses slowly, and they slowly recovered their decorum, and a single large warrior walked up and greeted their visitor. "Welcome to our humble camp, statesman." He placed his closed fist on his chest in greeting. "I am Avel, juggernaut of the Sultan. He was expecting a much greater commitment to our find." "Greetings of the day, Avel. I am Davin Muth, captain in archaeology of the Council of the State." He inclined his head. "As you know, resources scarce across the globe. As much as we would like to, we cannot just jump headlong into each lead that crosses our desks. I am here to assess the potential benefits of cooperation." "Of course, I understand. The Sultan invites you to partake in a feast in your honor in the hopes of many great years of peace and cooperation. This is Stephen. He will be happy to take your gear." As he spoke, another in slightly rattier clothing approached to help Davin take off his pack. "If it's all the same to you, I would prefer to keep my things with me, it being sensitive and rare tech and all." Stephen looked to Avel for a decision, and he inclined that the man should depart. "Of course, we understand. Please, the Sultan's camper is in the center of the camp." The camp was a motley collection of campers and other vehicles, surrounded by tents and animals. "If I may, with fuel so scarce, how can you maintain all of these vehicles?" inquired Davin as they made their way through the camp. "We have solar and other renewable energy resources. We also trade with some of the other tribes that have claimed some of the old oil rigs, and we also grow and harvest algae that can be refined into fuel and food. That is beyond my expertise, but that might be something the state is willing to trade for." "It is also beyond my knowledge, but it is something to keep in mind for your negotiations." Avel shrugged. "Ah, here is the Sultan's camper. Welcome." Within the grand camper with slide-out panels and powerful air conditioning, the Sultan sat at the far end of a large table that was currently being set with some of the finest-smelling food Davin had had in quite a while. "Ah, this must be the leader," the Sultan beamed. "Can I assume the rest of your team is securing your accommodations?" "It is just me for now, Sultan. This is quite a distance from where we normally tread." Davin inclined his head in greeting. "I must make certain that this find is worth our time." "The complex is vast, and we cannot wait around and support you while you explore it all." Highness, be assured, we are eager to see what secrets are held in the underground. However, with resource as scarce as it is, we have to be assured, with our own eyes, of its worth first. There was half a second where the Sultan's veneer of calm wavered. Ah, but of course, I understand. Completely. Please, lay down your burdens and join us at the table. As the Sultan stood to make his short way to the table, a group of servers pulled dishes from the table and removed some of the chairs. One of his helpers pulled out his chair to help him in as Davin put his pack down at the base of the wall closest to the chair that he had chosen to sit in. In the end, there were only 2 chairs left at the table. All the staff, including Avel, stood back and waited to be called on for whatever task they would be assigned. Will you be wanting to make your way to the ruins tonight? The Sultan asked around a full mouth. It has been a long trip, Sultan. I believe I will turn in early and take an early start tomorrow. Ah, excellent choice. Avel will be your liaison between yourself and us. He has been given the information he needs to get you into, around, and back from the site. You honor me, Sultan. The next morning, as Lucille began her climb to the heavens, Avel led Davin out of the camp, past an oasis and into a fissure beyond. The entrance to the compound was a good distance into the fissure and was well hidden from passing view. We first learned of this facility some years ago, Avel exposited as they approached, but we didn't know that it was such an extensive site until this season, when we finally gained entrance to the foyer, and we have been awaiting some kind of assistance in searching it for quite some time. It was my understanding, Davin returned, looking over the area, that your tribe didn't stay around in one place for more than a few weeks at any site. It is true, and to be honest, I and some of the others have been getting itchy to move. Avel nodded with a sigh. We have only ever worked at this site a little during the times we have been here. The Sultan believes there is a great reward that awaits for some kind of information on this site. Is this a recent idea? It is the first season I have heard of it, though I am not in the inner circle. I have to say, Avel, we of the state do value knowledge, but even with the tribes local to us where we have recurring trade is difficult to attain. I'm not certain what common ground we could find here. Such matters are not mine, Avel shrugged. Fighting and honor are about all I know. But remember, you did have interest in our solar and algae knowledge. That is true. So, let's see what this place may be worth so we can get negotiations started. By your leave, statesman. They stepped into a shallow cave and approached the door. It was certainly not natural, but the metal was painted and camouflaged to look like rock. There were clear indications of many people entering and leaving during a short time, and the door opening and closing several times. As Davin took some readings and measurements with his own equipment, Avel approached the side of the door, opened an access panel, and punched in a code he read from a shabby note. I thought you only knew how to fight, Davin laughed as a puff of air passed over them. I can also read. Did I not mention that? He smiled. This is as far as we have gotten in the past, but it was enough to attract the attention of many of the tribes in the region. I can see why. This is far beyond the level of tech in the area, Davin acknowledged with barely a smile. The inside was cool. A soft organic light cascaded over composites, ceramics, and metals. Many artifacts and tools littered the ground and were covered with dust and dirt. The center of the room was a lowered pit, with mounts where collapsed gratings should be connected, and above were some pipes, wires, and spigots. Around the lowered area were raised areas where controls should be, though most of it was stripped of all components, and some of the railings had even been destroyed. This was a decontamination center, Davin knew. Directly across from the entrance was a door that had not been breached, but around the room all other doors had been opened, though they led nowhere. This matches the layouts of the compounds we found in the Phalorn Mountains back home. It's probably a fallout shelter. There should be food, water, munitions, fuel, etc. in there. Fallout shelter? Avel asked, curious because he had nothing better to do. Yes, the old governments designed and built these things all over the world before Lucille turned red, Davin remarked as he found and opened a hidden panel. I always thought Yellow Lucille was a myth. Are you telling me it's true? Yes, the state has extensive records from the time immediately following the chromal shift, Davin shrugged, digging around in his bag. Looks like this was an unmanned facility, though, unlike the other ones we have seen, and it has survived relatively untouched. There may be complete Yellow Lucille records beyond. Is that significant? Ah, yes, a lot of knowledge and tech was lost during that time, not to mention literature and other records. He started to search for connections to attach his own equipment to the panel. We'll have to see what this is when we get out of decon. I have to ask, what is decon? It means to remove contamination, like radiation, biological debris, environmental contamination, that kind of stuff. He returned, finishing his connections. What are you doing? There is no power, and this door cannot be opened without it, so I have to introduce some. How can there be no power? There is light all around us. The light is emitted by a form of algae beyond those panels, designed so that they have enough food to last for a dozen more years or so. As he started up his very concentrated fuel cell, the panels around the door lit up and flashed symbols. As quickly as these symbols appeared, Davin responded and navigated menus and submenus. Are you actually reading that or guessing? Avel marveled. Reading. If you make the wrong entry, you risk putting the facility in lockdown, and that would be a majorly bad situation. How can you read that? It's pre-shift Asnian, not a local-derived language, but I have learned to read it in my work. He finished his computer work and pressed an action key. Open sesame! The door shifted slightly back and tilted to become the floor. As it did so, Davin pulled out a pair of rebreather masks and then sampled some air. Well, that's odd. I was expecting the air to be far more stale, but these readings are relatively normal. He put the mask back in his bag and pulled out a gun. You appear concerned, statesman, Avel observed as he too pulled out a sword and a handgun. I am extremely concerned, Avel. If the air was not stagnate, it means this facility could have been manned, and if they haven't been out of this facility, as the state of it suggests, there will be most likely hostile, he acknowledged. I was under the impression that the peoples of this area didn't use projectile weapons, he noted the gun of Avel. It is not normal, no, Avel shrugged. But we do have to be ready in case a major offensive happens. Rest assured, though, I am one of the few in this tribe that is very proficient. It's good to know. Stay ready. As they had been talking, light fluttered to life, illuminating a very long corridor, devoid of dust and debris. How far does it go? Avel gasped. Given how far underground it is, Davin shrugged, stepping in. As far as needed. Watch your step. Security protocols may be in place. Avel hesitated. This was already more than he had bargained for, but he was bound to protect the statesman, and he would not dishonor himself by staying behind. By your leave, statesman. Continue. The pair cautiously made their way into the corridor, clearing some rooms as they went. Davin making some notes on his wrist-mounted computer for later, Avel suppressing his fear of enclosed spaces and doing his best to cover their flanks. I do not wish to speak out of place, statesman, but do you have a destination in mind? The main facility has a control node and a primary server at the center of the facility, and all the applicable information we need to make a decision will be there. As he tried to access another room, an alarm suddenly sounded. That does not bode well for us, does it? No, Avel, it does not. That is a vault integrity alarm. I was wrong. It's not manned. It's a seed arc with a central growing chamber, and this door must lead to a biosphere, and it didn't recognize my technology. Did it suddenly get very cold? Yes, it's a flash freeze protocol to protect the seeds. Invaders will not normally be equipped to handle the cold, especially here in the desert. Davin bolted down the corridor. We have about 15 minutes before we freeze to death. Well, today is not a good day to die, but how is there enough power to cool it? Avel demanded, following close behind. Oh, this place is probably nuclear powered, and it has a heat sink miles away to mislead tomb raiders, Davin returned as if his life wasn't at stake. Just before they were to enter a cross corridor, Davin abruptly stopped them both. That is the main corridor, not far from the node I talked about. It will have traps, and they will have been activated now. Avel pulled from one of his mini pockets a mini spyglass and used it to look around the corners. Looks like there are at least 2 turrets that have extended from panels on either side of the wall, and 1 from the ceiling. And their targeting protocols will be far too quick for us to react to. I hope you have a trick up your sleeve. Avel's breath was already puffing. Rather than waste time by acknowledging the other again, Davin pulled out a large data pad and a collection of wires and tools to break into a peripheral processing unit a few steps away from the corner and opened up an unassuming panel beyond. With shivering hands, he snipped and attached wires systematically and tapped on the pad. After a moment of furious work and whisper-screamed epitaphs, he rubbed his hands and turned to Avel, teeth chattering. Avel, are the turrets still active? With fumbling hands of his own, Avel picked up his spyglass again. The turrets have retracted. The way is clear, Statesman. Before he could finish, Davin rushed past. Come on, we haven't much time left. The pair began to run. If you could hack the system from there, why did you not stop the cold? That was a local power node. Environmental controls are hardened, and the only high-speed access to it is directly from the control area. The door to the control node was in lockdown, and Davin's fingers started to fail to respond correctly, but he diligently hacked the door, though very slowly. Finally, the door opened and revealed the control room. It was a decent-sized room with controls and screens and other technological gadgetry. Do you have any idea which control controls the chills? Avel gasped, seeing the complexity of the room. I have a little, but the cold is starting to get to me, Davin responded, heading to a terminal at the far end of the room. Seconds seemed like hours as Davin worked controls and surfed a bazillion menus. Finally, as his lips turned blue and his skin became gray, Davin sighed and collapsed in victory. It's not getting any warmer, Statesman, Avel breathed into his hands to warm them up. It will take a bit for the system to reset from the quick cool to warm, Davin sighed. After I get feeling back in my fingers, I'm going to search the system for what it's worth. After the pair recovered and the mainframe was scanned for useful bits, they made their way back to the decon chamber. Just outside the facility, the Sultan waited with a contingent of well-armed warriors. Ah, Sultan, Davin remarked calmly as Avel's eyes grew in shock. This facility is indeed impressive. We may be able to negotiate a finder's fee for you and your tribe. Foolish statesman, the Sultan chuckled. This was never about your precious production resource. I have no use for the coin of a dying empire. I was hoping to have more of you to sell to the Gegne, but at least you opened up a new shelter for us. We could always use the supplies inside. My Sultan, Avel started, his shock all over his face. What is this? This was... You are out of line, Avel, the Sultan sneered. Return to your post or suffer the same fate as the statesman. I have accepted the charge of protection of the statesman, and I have honor. Very well, the Sultan shrugged. Take them both down. Try not to kill them unless you have to. We can't sell corpses. The pair darted back into the decon chamber. The Gegne are not kind to their slaves. I would recommend it not being taken alive. As short as it was, it has been a real honor to work with you. Let's take down as many of these honorless pigs as we can, Avel sneered. Sounds like a plan, Davin shrugged, but stopped Avel from darting into the fray. How do you feel about Ex Machina? Are you still recovering from the cold? What is Ex Machina? While we were looking through the computer, I contacted the state. All we have to do is survive for 30 minutes, and air superiority will be ours. About 30 minutes later. At times it was a little hairy, but the pair did manage to hold out for the intended period of time. Then, quietly at first, a loud drone erupted. The wind from the hovering craft knocked over the aggressors. "What kind of craft is that?" called Avel over the deafening noise. "That is a high-speed vertical takeoff and landing jet, the only craft that could get here from the state in time."
"Troops of the Sultan,"
the loudspeaker blared,
"lay down your arms and retreat. You will not be warned again."
In response, the Sultan's troops shot at the plane, at which point the plane's miniguns roared to life and made bloodstains out of anything that moved. After it was over, Davin manipulated his wrist computer. "Air Wing Night Terror, thanks for the assist. Looks like you got them all." "Not a problem, Captain," the plane returned. "We can't shut down here. We'll have to take up a position just before the oasis, sending you an op point called Able." "Roger, copy receipt of coordinates. Meet you in 10. "Roger, out." "Though the troops have scattered, the survivors will be back. And since I do not see the Sultan amongst the dead, we have made a very dedicated enemy today." Avel held out his hand to Davin. "The state will be persona non grata in this area. Though you can obviously take care of yourself, you should probably leave quickly." Davin returned the handshake. "The state can hold our own. What of you, Avel? Surely you are a non grata yourself now." "There are many tribes where my skill is renowned, as well as my honor. There is also the state," Davin shrugged. "We also highly value honor and skill." "But I am of the tribe that tried to kill you." "And you sacrificed blood, sweat, and tears, and ruined your own life to save your charge." "Well, how does one become a statesman then?" "We find citizens in many ways, but in the end, one gets sponsorship to attend indoctrination," Davin returned. "From what I have seen, you have great potential. If you want it, you have my endorsement, but we do have to leave now."